Alright guys, welcome to Intro to Programming using PowerShell as a base. This is part one of a series that I'm going to be doing, introducing you to programming concepts using PowerShell as a base. Now, many other classes will teach you using different languages, using C++, Java, Python. It doesn't really matter in the end. The important part is that you understand the basic concepts because you're going to be applying those across all different programming languages. Now, there are a few exceptions to this, such as object-oriented programming versus function-oriented programming, but that's not important right now. The trick right now is to get you started. All right, so first things first, these are the basic concepts I'm going to be introducing you today. First of all, we're going to be figuring out the PowerShell itself, as well as the integrated scripting environment, or the ISE, and a couple different editors that we can use, such as Notepad++. We're going to go over how to do things in PowerShell and the reasons why you might want to do them. We're going to use parameters, passing things through to the commandlets. We'll talk about commandlets as well. And storing things in variables, using variables, etc. Pipelining, which is a concept in PowerShell, and how to create a script. So here we go. Moving on to the desktop here, I want to show you how to launch PowerShell. First thing you're going to do is you're going to search for it. Alternatively, you can use the start menu and navigate directly, but the easiest thing to do is just type PowerShell. And you see you're going to have a couple options here. The very first one here is going to be PowerShell itself. And if you launch this, you're going to get the standard PowerShell window here. You see it will drop you right in to the PowerShell, which looks a lot like a command prompt or a DOS prompt if you're familiar with that concept. You're going to see it's automatically in your user directory. Now, alternatively, when you launch PowerShell, you can launch PowerShell as an administrator. Let's see, so you'll see it on the menu here. You can choose to right-click and do Run as Administrator, or alternatively from the task option, if you have it already pinned there, or if it's showing up because you have a PowerShell window open, you can choose the Run as Administrator option. You can tell the difference when you access the window because it will indicate at the top of the window. Sorry, I'm learning how to do YouTube streaming as I do this on the desktop. Okay, there we go. In the top left-hand corner, you will see Administrator is next to it, and the location that it drops you to is C Windows System 32. Now, I've seen videos on PowerShell and programming before that show you, or rather tell you, that you should always be in the administrator mode, and I would disagree with this. The reason I disagree with this is because I come from a security background. What I do for a living is secure computers, and here's the thing. You want to go in the mode of least privilege at all times, wherever possible, whenever possible, unless you have to go higher. If you get into administrator and you start running scripts on your system as administrator, if you download them or you start writing code, you can do a lot of things to your computer because, of course, you have all the permissions in the world. So I would recommend, until you get to a need where you actually need to run things as administrator, stick with the regular PowerShell and then elevate when you need to. All right? So this is the PowerShell itself. You can actually double check what current version of PowerShell you are running. Let me switch here. We go to the PowerShell window, and we do the very first commandlet that we're going to try here, which is get-host. Now, PowerShell introduces the concept of commandlets, and the way that they do commandlets is in a format they refer to as verb-noun. So you see how we've got get-host. So we've got a verb here and we've got a noun, and this is going to be what we're going to do with the noun. So we're getting information about the host here. And you see it will return back for me here, PowerShell version 5.1, and a lot of other essentially useless information at the moment here. But I'm running Windows 10. This is going to be the default version of PowerShell that you're going to get with Windows 10. It is the same as you would get with Server 2012 R2 if you're running on that environment. If you have an older version of Windows, such as Windows Vista, Windows 7, you're going to have a default of PowerShell 2.0. Some of the higher versions, I think Windows 8, Windows 8.1 might have had PowerShell 3, PowerShell 4. Same with 2012, 2008 R2, etc. Now, there's extra commandlets and things that come with the higher versions of PowerShell, but for getting started, we don't need any of that right now, so it doesn't really matter. However, if you do want to get into that, I'll tell you two things. The way that you get PowerShell 5 on the lower systems is by installing what they call the Windows Remote Management Toolkit, and version 5 will give you PowerShell 5. Now, they're both 5. That's kind of a coincidence, really. You're not going to go downloading PowerShell 5. You're going to download this Windows Remote Management Toolkit, and you'll need to download it for your operating system, install it, and so on. Now, there's also going to be a Microsoft.NET version associated with your PowerShell here. That's not important right now because, again, we're not directly accessing those versions, but you can go download the latest version of the Microsoft.NET framework as well. Right. So, we now know what version we're in. That's important to keep in mind later on when we get into more advanced concepts. But for now, we're going to switch over and we're going to take a look at the integrated scripting environment. And this is going to be launched the same way. From the start menu, you can type better than I do. And look here, you have the Windows PowerShell ISE. You'll see there's an x86 version. I've never found a use case for this, but I'm sure that there is one. And similar with this, you can also run as administrator if you need to, but again, I do not recommend that. And you can, of course, also right-click from here. I do recommend if you're going to get into PowerShell, you just go ahead and do a pin to taskbar so that you have this at all times. Even if you do not have it launched, it will always be here available for you. So again, the PowerShell integrated scripting environment, we'll switch over to here. And this is a great place in general for PowerShell folks, starting with especially with the beginners, because the reason this is so good for you is because it gives you a couple different things. The first thing is it automatically gives you the regular PowerShell. But you'll notice at the right hand side here, you have a list of commands. So it actually gives you right away the entire list of all the commands that are available for you when you're in PowerShell. And of course, this integrated scripting environment is respective to your version of PowerShell. So if you have PowerShell 2, it'll only show you PowerShell 2 commands, and if you have PowerShell 5, it'll show you all commands as well. So once you get into here, there are the extra sections, and of course, if you're going to make a new script, you just click New Script. You see it automatically popped up a tab here, and I can start scripting out what I want to do. Save this file, and then you see there's also a play button right here which says run script, and that's going to automatically execute that script in this little window down here. So you can immediately test out code that you want to do and work from it from there. And the other advantage is, of course, if you're brand new to PowerShell, this is going to be great. If you've never seen this before, it's going to blow your mind. You can see I can start typing a command here and it automatically gives me an autocomplete. This is absolutely wonderful when you're first learning out the program because it goes all the way down. If I start passing a parameter, you'll see it'll give me all the parameter options, including the various options for the parameters if they are standard options. So that is wonderful as well. Now you can, of course, immediately execute a command down here, such as the get host. Type better than I do, guys. And you'll see it gives you the response. Similarly, I can go up here to get host and play the script, and you'll see it gives me the exact same thing down here. All right. Now there's also another window in here that you can see. I forget what they call it. I have never used it in my whole thing. I believe it's this command thing here. So if you see an extra little box in here, that's probably what that is. I wouldn't worry about it, especially if you're just getting used to this. Now, for myself, I don't use the ISE anymore because in my personal preference, I tend to run PowerShell directly, and I tend to edit my code in a third-party editor. Now, there's a large variety of editors out there, going from the very basic Notepad that's in Windows to advanced features such as Notepad++, which is my personal favorite, and there's a large variety of other ones. Drawing a blank now, XKCD recently did a comic about a brand new one that everyone seems to love, which is super amazing and whatnot. It's personal preference. Now, Notepad++, brief introduction here. I can start scripting out and I can say the same thing. I can do get-host, and you see it automatically did some formatting for me. And when I save this, you see I've got this saved as testscript.ps1. All I did is I added that extension, and when I save this, you'll see here it automatically recognizes. Oh, you cannot actually see that, can you? language. There we go, PowerShell. You can see that it has automatically detected that I am on PowerShell. And you see the huge list here. There's a lot of other programming languages that this recognizes, and it will do a lot of automatic features for you, which are very nice. It will automatically recognize things such as comments. You see how it turned it green there. Let me switch back so it's a little easier for you to see. There we go. This is a comment. So you immediately see some formatting results. I can also do a if, and when I do a parenthesis, you see how it's kind of, I don't know if you can see that or not, it kind of got a little highlight around it, and I close it, and now you see they're both red. This is telling me that this is the beginning and close of a parenthesis. If I do another parenthesis in here, you'll see that it wraps and corresponds to whichever set of parentheses that you're selected next to, right? So again, type better than I do. You see how it's automatically selecting the corrective set of parentheses. It'll do the same thing for the squiggly brackets for functions. This is great for debugging, guys. I tell you what, you're going to spend a lot of your time debugging, unfortunately, especially when you're brand new to code. You're going to be learning that you are terrible at typing, just like I am. I hate to tell you, you're going to burst your bubble right now. It's going to happen. But this is great for you in that regard. Now, the ISE will do some of that stuff for you. Unfortunately, it is not quite as good, but you see it does a little bit of that automatically as well. Now, oh, again, you can't see it. There you go. You can see it going back and forth. That's super amazing. I'm sure you guys are excited to watch that. All right, so that's Notepad++. Now, the thing about Notepad++, of course, is that you don't immediately have that button like you do in the ISE, that play button, so that when you want to run the code, you're going to have to go back in to your, let's see, Notepad++. We're going to do a little command. Let's see, get host. That's sufficient. All right. We're going to save that. We've just saved that. I'm going to switch back over to my PowerShell. And all right, we need to go find that file, which is saved on the desktop. So this is standard DOS. I'm just going to do a CD desktop because I know that's where it's saved. And then I can tab through the files once I start typing, of course. Test script, there we go. You see it calls it up automatically when I hit tab. I just have to start typing the first few letters. And this is great, especially for newbies, because your newbies are going to realize very quickly that PowerShell requires something which is called dot sourcing when you call a script. You see how it's got a dot and a backslash here at the beginning. Again, I will emphasize that is a backslash. And a lot of new folks get confused on this when they first start out. A backslash is best remembered by being beneath the backspace key. The key on the question mark key is the /. All right, and it is unfortunately very important which one you choose. All right, so again, if you're calling a script, it's going to automatically autocomplete for you with this if it knows it's a PS1 file, a PowerShell file. But if you were to type it out yourself, you would need to make sure that you have that // in front of the file name. And you'll see what happens when I hit enter. You're going to get this message immediately that says you cannot run a script on the system because it is disabled. Now, this is default across pretty much all versions of Windows. So the very first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go change that. And what you do is you do a get execution policy, and you can autocomplete. Yep. And you'll see it comes back and it says restricted. And what restricted means essentially is that you cannot run scripts at all. So in order to change that, we're going to do a set execution policy. And I can tab through all the various options here. All right. So it starts out with all signed, and what that means is that any code that you run needs to be signed. You're probably not going to be signing your code when you're starting out, so that's not an option you want to choose. Bypass simply means that you can bypass the execution policy when you're running this particular script. So you can run a script regardless of whatever your policy is. That's a little complicated for starters, so let's ignore for the now. Default is just default. I'm not sure exactly what default really means. Remote signed means that you must have the code signed if you've downloaded this script from somewhere else or pulled it from a shared drive somewhere on the internet or on your local network. Again, probably not going to be too relevant to you. This is great if you want to be a little more secure than the next setting, which is the unrestricted, because it means that if you've downloaded something, it'll check with you real quick if you want to execute that stuff first. Unrestricted is what it sounds like. Unrestricted, you can run any code. So I'm going to switch my computer right now to the remote signed option, and it's going to give me a confirmation. I will say Y for yes. All right, and you see you get this. This is one of the reasons why you might want to switch to the administrative PowerShell. All right, so we're going to switch over here, and we're going to say the exact same thing again. We're going to do the set execution policy, and we're going to say remote signed again. It'll ask me again, and this time it will not give me an error. The error that it gave me in the other window, if we switch back here, is that it did not have permission to change a registry key. And again, that was because you were not running as an administrator. Now this is an inconvenience, certainly, but again, from a security perspective, absolutely a great idea. You want to have that kind of control of your system. You want to say, hey, you're changing something important that is normally restricted, all right? I know people don't like the pop-ups, the UAC stuff, the click the yes, the no, things like that. It's really annoying, but it's there for a very good reason, all right? I'm not going to harp on that. We're going to continue on. I'm going to real quick do here a CLS. This is just a regular DOS command, and it's just going to clear the screen. And we're going to now run our code again with that test script. And you see it gives me the get host response. All right. So congratulations if you've been following along, doing the same thing I've been doing. You now have your very first script. See how easy it was, right? No? Well, maybe you have to go back and play the video, watch a few other videos to get used to it. Either way, moving on. Next topic of conversation here is the concepts. Again, we're going to do some stuff and the reasons why you might want to do them, okay? So, why we might want to do something? Well, we just started with a very basic one here. We want to know what version of PowerShell we have on the system, all right? So, we executed a little script that told us, hey, your version is 5.1 point whatever, and there you go. There's a lot of different reasons why you might want to do some scripting. All right. Well, let me take a little tangent here. You might be wondering why I'm saying scripting instead of programming. It's not important right now. The truth is that scripting and programming are nearly identical to each other. There is a long technical answer, interpreters, compiling. Don't worry about it right now. I will tell you this, however. When you start talking to a person and they specifically refer to themselves as a scripter, like I will do, I'm a scripter, I am not a programmer. The reason they're saying that is because it's a mindset. A scripter is somebody who wants to write a real quick bit of code that is going to accomplish something, and they don't want to be bothered with all the necessary consequences and things that you might have to be within programming. Programming is a little bit more rigorous. Typically, you're going to have to deal with garbage collection, memory, things like that. The great thing about PowerShell is it handles pretty much all of that for you. You don't need to worry about all that stuff. It's a lot less complicated to just get in, start writing a little bit of code, start executing, tinkering around, learning the concepts without a whole lot of consequences, except of course if you start telling it to delete things like System32, as you might be aware. Not a good idea. But that's essentially the reasons why somebody might say that. All right. With programming, you have to typically compile code, which is a lot more intensive. It's a lot more intimidating for a newbie. All right. So now you know some reasons why people might do this. You may want to write code, as I do, to check the security of a system. You want to make sure that that registry key that tells it to make sure that all code is signed in the system is always there. And you can set this script to automatically run on the computer. Or you can set it to run against all of the computers in your environment just from your admin desktop. You've got 2,000 computers in your environment. You want to make sure everyone's got everything set in exactly the right way, right? So you can do this with a single script at your computer, and it'll touch all the computers in your environment, and it'll confirm all of that information right from your own desktop. And if it's not set, you can tell it to set it, right? So there's all kinds of things like this. Now, another major reason that you're going to want to learn things like PowerShell is because a lot of Microsoft products, if you're an IT admin, are going to start requiring PowerShell to set them up. Sure, there's a bit of GUIs. Things like Exchange do have the management console or the EWS where you can go in and you can click buttons and set things. The vast majority of settings are going to be there. The important stuff, the very deep advanced settings, are not going to be there. You're going to need to learn some of the PowerShell stuff to be able to handle those kinds of things. And on a regular day-to-day basis, there's going to be a lot of tasks that you can automate with PowerShell. You take a lot less time. You'll save yourself a lot of heartache, and you can even make yourself look like the hero. Scotty from Star Trek, it takes, it's going to take 10 hours to repair it, Captain. And you show up and you've done it in 5 minutes. Hey, you look like a hero. Unless, of course, you do that too much, and then you start looking like a schmuck. Point aside, you can do a lot of great stuff with PowerShell. In a lot of cases, you have to do it with PowerShell, all right? So, moving on, again, with our PowerShell, we want to learn parameters on these commandlets. Again, I'm going to go back a little bit on the commandlets thing, and we're going to do here get verb. And what this does is it tells me here what are all the various verbs that are available in PowerShell commandlets. All right. So you see things here. There's a big group of commons. You've got things like add, clear, close, enter, right? This is more important for you when you start making your own functions. But when you're a newbie, you're getting used to what are the various kinds of things that are typically available with something. You kind of want to familiarize yourself with what are the common things. So get right off the bat is a very important one. You're almost always going to be doing a get very first thing you do, right? So I do get host. I see information about the host. I do get child item on the C drive. I can see here are the child items. Well, okay, I screwed up. Get child item on the location I'm at right now, which is my desktop. I can see here are the things that are here. I've got a folder called cleanup, and I've got a script here. All right, and I can go on and on and on with this, right? I can do get file hash right on that test script, and it's going to come back with a SHA-256 hash on that file. All right. Now the opposition, of course, to the get command is going to be the set command. And you saw that earlier when we did the execution policy. Get execution policy tells me what it is, and set execution policy is going to do exactly the opposite. I'm going to set what the system is going to do here. I'm going to change my mind here because we're not in our admin PowerShell and we can't do it again. But these things match up with each other. And so when you do that get verbs, get verb singular, you're going to see that you have that there. You have the get command and you have the set command. Now there's a couple other ones that are going to match up like that. With the data, for example, you have your imports and your exports, right? Syncing and saving, things like that, all right? So you, of course, with the ISE in hand, you've got this nice big long list of all the various things. And I can show details on these things as they pop up. Why didn't that pop up? I don't know. I screwed something up. Regardless here, I can see all the various commands that are available. And then I can, of course, take them and you say insert. And it dropped it into my little window here and I can use them. Same thing with the regular PowerShell. And the autocomplete, if I start typing something and I say get hyphen, and I just hit tab, and I just keep scrolling through tab, I can see here are all the various things that I can do, right? And I've hit tab 20 times and I'm only just now getting to the B's. There's a lot of things that you can do here. And if you want to get more information, you can do the get commands. Get command, right. Okay, so it lists out all the things that you can do. It's the exact same thing as in the ISE, a big long list of everything that you can do, right? Once you find a command that you like, you want to know how to use it, there's two easy ways that you can do this, right? I can do, you see I've got here at the end, write host, right? I can immediately just do a hyphen and I can tab through all of the parameters, all right? So that was our next topic of conversation here, parameters. These are things that you pass to a commandlet to tell them more information about what you want that commandlet to do. Now, in this particular case, the default option is this out variable. And there's a couple other ones like out buffer, pipeline variable, object, no new line, separator, foreground color, background color, and so on. Now, as soon as I hit verbose, I know that I've entered into the default options. Pretty much every commandlet is going to have a series of default options, right? These are things that are going to be on every single commandlet, and you're always going to see them. It kind of signifies, if you're an experienced PowerShell admin, that you've reached the list of the special options for a particular command. So verbose, debug, error action, warning action, information action, error variable, warning variable, information variable, out variable. Those are the default options, right? So I can do all that stuff. Now, there are also short ways of using commandlets, right? So in this particular case, I can say, what is the default for right host? You know, I just realized I have never done this before. Let me see what happens with this. Hello. There you go. Okay, so the object that I'm going to pass to right host, I just passed what's called a string. And a string is a set of characters, alphanumeric characters, words typically, right? You can put numbers in there as well. And in the old school days, and if they teach you C or C++, or more C really, they'll teach you that a string is what's known as an array of characters. In things like PowerShell, C++, and so on and beyond, a string is just a string, and you don't really need to worry about what's behind it because Microsoft and whoever else writes these brand new higher level languages handles all that logic for you. All right, but regardless, I've passed what's called a string. I can also pass in a variable as well. So I can say, and the signifier, by the way, for a variable is the $sign. And then when anything you put after that is going to be a variable, and you see it's automatically making it green for me, so I know that it's a variable. I can do that. Now, the variable, I guess I should come up with a better name for my variable so people don't get confused, is that it is empty, right? So I've passed the right host to the thing, and dutifully it did what I told it to do, but there was nothing in variable. So of course it's going to write nothing to the screen. But I can, the purpose of this is that it can pass all kinds of objects. I can pass strings, I can pass variables, I can pass arrays, all kinds of stuff, right? It's very dutifully telling me exactly what I told it to do. In this case, that happened to just be nothing at all. Now, back to my point earlier, I can do this the short way. They do what they call order. Actually, what is the name for that? Regardless, there's a specific order of ways to pass things to a particular commandlet, and it knows automatically what I'm passing to it and to which parameter because of the order that I did it. So I can pass the object to right host without even saying object. So in this case, right host, again guys, type better than I do, hello, and it automatically knows, all right, hello is a string, and it knows that that's an object because that's what it passed. Now, in the case of right host, and we're going to teach you something new here, which is wonderful as well, the get help commandlet is going to tell you everything that you want to know about any of the commands. So I can do get help, and then I pass the commandlet that I want to know more about, which is right host in this case. And you see it's going to tell me what's the syntax for this, right? So the very first thing in the order for right host is the object. So I pass as the very first thing into right host the object that I wanted it to do. Now I can also pass in additional ones. Now right host isn't a great one because the second thing here is no new line. I can't really pass in no new line to that. But let's say I have a different commandlet where the second thing in here is something else. I could literally do 2 strings in a row after right host. So I would just do right host space hello again, and it would automatically pass through that second item to the second item in the right host. I think it's called a pipeline in this case as well, although I kind of don't want to get you guys confused on that in case I'm doing this wrong. But it passes that through to that automatically based on the order, right? So it's going to automatically do that. Now I can also go through here and I can do right host hello, and I should be able to do red. No, okay, so I screwed up in this case. So it automatically tried to pass through red, probably to no new line, and it said, nah, no, that's not really a thing. You can't do that. And so what it did is it automatically interpreted this as an array. What it actually did is it took hello and red, it put them together, and it passed them both through. It ignored my quotation marks and passed it through directly as one entire long string, right? But if I go back and I do hello and I put in front of this foreground color and I say red, and I don't have to put quotation marks around this because this is a recognized object, but I could just as easily put quotation marks around it. And you say now, okay, the foreground color for hello is now red. And just to illustrate, if I do that without the quotation marks, it does exactly the same thing. I can also pass through the background color black, and you see now it's black. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, maybe it's not too good. Let's try yellow. Okay, that's hideous, but I think you get the point. All right. Now get help is wonderful, and if I go back, oh, by the way, if I'm hitting up and down arrows here, by the way, it tells me the previous commands that I've done. I can go up to go all the way back. You see I'm all the way back now to where we started with the get host, and then I can scroll back down and you can see I'm back to my right host command. This is great. You can do a command, I can press up and down, and it will automatically bring back previous things. So if I just want to add something else, like no new line, it will automatically give me that opportunity, so I have to type the whole command all over again. I saw in another video here, this is something new to me actually, so you guys can learn that too. You can do a start-transcript. And what this does is it automatically records everything that you're doing in this PowerShell to a file. So you can record for yourself a set of commands, and if you said, hey man, what did that thing that I do yesterday, I figured out that problem and I don't remember what I did, I want to go back and look. You can see here now in this file, this is a transcript of everything that you've typed here. So if I do another write hello new line, now I can open in a program like Notepad, and I'm not going to do it here so it's simple, but you guys can launch it with regular Notepad through the start menu, it doesn't matter. It's going to pop up for me this Notepad. Hold on while I switch my screens. There you go. It's showing me the transcript, right? It gives me a little bit of information about the shell first. But now it's telling me everything that I did here. So it says exactly what it said in the window here. Transcript has been started, right? And here's the file. Then the next line is the command and the response, followed by the command where I launch the Notepad, right? So it's recording all this information for you for, well, posterity if you like, but more for your own sake if you want to remember some of these items, right? And again, what I was telling you before with the verbs, of course, you should just be able to, logically speaking, I have never used this command. I don't even know if this is a real command. I'm going to try it. Stop transcript. Hey, sure enough, it stopped the transcript. It's no longer going to output to that file. But just so you guys know, that's a great way to remember some of the things that you've done in the past. All right. Now, I'm going to clear the screen again. And next topic of conversation was the variables. Right. We talked about variables a little bit. If I want to say something to a variable, again, it is simply just the variable indicator, which is the $sign, and a variable name. Let's do something a little bit smarter than variable, right? Let's do answer this time, all right? And if I want to know what the answer to 2 plus 2 is, I can save it with the equal sign. Equal sign will save everything after it to that variable. And this is a little bit important when you get later into the pipelines. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you put this variable at the very beginning of a line with an equal sign, it will save everything to the right, including everything that you do with the pipelines. All right. So now I've saved the answer to answer, and it doesn't write it to the screen when you do this, but I can immediately write it back to the screen just by dropping answer and hitting enter, and you see I get 4. All right. Now that I have a variable called answer, I can see all kinds of things about the variable. And this is important in PowerShell because there's a lot of different kinds of variables, right? In this particular case, what I can do is dot, and what this is doing is it's getting information about the variable. Get type, and then I'm going to do a open and close parenthesis. This is just a thing. This is kind of a holdover from .NET, but this is the way that you get information about the type on the variable. If I hit enter here, you see it comes back. It says this is a public variable. It's a serial variable. It's an int32 variable, and the base type is system value type. Now, not a whole lot of that is terribly interesting or usable at this point in time, but one thing it does tell you is that it is an int32. It's an integer with 32 bits, which is basically your standard integer type. There's also integers with 64 bits if you're on a 64-bit system. Not terribly important right now. But if I, for example, do another variable, let's say hello, I'm going to call the variable hello just for simplicity's sake, and I put in a string that says hello, and I save it, and I write hello out. You can see it does the exact same thing. And if I do a get type, it will also give me that information that I had before. And you see now it says that it's a string. It's also a base type of a system object. All right. You know, objects, value types, we'll get into that. It's a little more advanced, right? But the point being is that there's different kinds of variables that can hold different kinds of things, and when you do with them, you have to be cognizant of the fact that different types of variables go in different places to do different things. I cannot, for example, if I do another variable that says goodbye and put goodbye in it, I can't do answer equals hello plus goodbye and expect it to do an integer operation for me, right? So I guess the question I'd have for you right now is, what do you think this is going to do if I try to do this, right? Different programming languages might handle this differently. In the case of C, you might very well get an integer answer, which is the sum of all the characters in the arrays for both hello and goodbye, right? Might be some ridiculous number like, you know, 4,312, which is essentially just the ASCII values for H and E and L and O and goodbye, right? All put together and summed up. In the case of PowerShell, it knows, hey, this is a string, and when I add a string to a string, I'm going to do a string addition. And if I come back out with answer, you see it simply just added the two together. All right. In the back end, it's treating it like an array of characters, and it just puts them all together like ducks in a row. Right. So it prints that out all together. Now, there's other information you can see about this variable. So for example, I can also do a answer.count, and you see, well, there's only one thing in answer, right? Now, if I were doing this in C, I would get a different answer entirely. It would tell me the number of items that are in this array, right? It knows how many characters are. And so PowerShell does a similar thing. If I do length, it tells me, hey, there's 14 characters in this, right? C would give me, for count, it would say 14 because it knows that there's 14 characters in that array. Now, for those of you who are confused, I keep saying array. I apologize. I should have explained this earlier. An array is when you take a bunch of things and you put them together, right? So if I get hello and I get goodbye and I get thank you and I get you're welcome, these are 4 different strings. I can put them together into a single object, a single variable, with 4 elements, right? And that's what's called an array. And I can make arrays of all kinds of things. PowerShell gets kind of crazy in this actually with the types of arrays that you can get into. I can make arrays of objects, and the object can be an array of arrays, right? And it just goes down and down and down, right? So the advantage of an array is that with a single object, I can store a whole bunch of objects. Let me give you an example here. This is an array, and the array is equal to string hello, and it's also the string goodbye, and it's also the string thank you, and the string you're welcome. All right, and if I put array back to the screen, you see how instead of doing it like it did earlier, where it put them all together into a single line, it put them on different lines, and the reason it did that is because they're different objects. So when I write array to the screen like this, PowerShell in the background knows what this is supposed to be doing. It knows that this is supposed to be a write host. It's literally going to take the contents of array and write them to the screen. Now, what write host knows is that you're passing through things in the pipeline to the screen, right? Each item in that array is coming out and getting passed in as a write host. So it takes each one in sequence. This is object number 0. Don't forget in programming you start from 0, not from 1. This is object number 0, and it's putting out to the screen, then goodbye, then thank you, then you're welcome, and it writes them each one. All right? So it knows to take all of them one by one, write them to the screen with a write host, right? And I can address each element of this array by using the square brackets and the index of the item. So again, remember it starts from 0. So item 0 is that hello that we passed. Item 1 is goodbye, and so on and so on. Now, if I go on and you say, hey, what about object number 4? It doesn't do anything, right? There is no object number 4. Now, in a programming language like C, you'd get a problem. You'd have a out of bounds exception. It would say, hey, item number 4 doesn't exist. You didn't allocate this. You can't go there. You can't do that. Error, abort, crash, blue screen of death, right? PowerShell's much more forgiving in that, and that's where I go back to earlier with that topic about scripting versus programming. It's much easier to script. It's much more forgiving, right? They know that this is a very high-level language, and it deals with a lot of those problems, right? Okay. And when I say high-level language, what I mean is that it's much, much more like English. It's much more intelligible to a human directly as it is, as comparison to binary, right? Writing ones and zeros directly to the computer, or machine language, which is just slightly above that, right? You're doing peeks and pokes directly at memory, and then other languages which are a little bit higher above that, and so on, right? English is the highest level language in this example, binary being the lowest level language in this example, right? And then most programming languages fall somewhere in between. PowerShell is very, very near the top. Okay, so moving on, I mentioned the pipeline a minute ago because I took array and I dropped it to the screen and I passed it in the pipeline to write host. Pipeline is another PowerShell concept. It does exist in other programming languages, but it is very powerful in PowerShell. What it means is that you can take objects or results of commands and pass them into other things. So in this particular example, when I just type array like this, what it's really doing is it's taking array and it's passing it, to a pipeline. And the way you do the pipeline operator is with the pipe command or the bar command, or character rather, and that is the same key as the backspace key right above the enter key, except you hold shift, right? It does an up and down line. And now what this is saying on the screen is that everything to the left of the pipe is being passed to the right. Okay, so I'm taking the contents of array and I'm going to pass it into the next thing that I type, and in this case it's going to be right host. And you see it did the exact same thing. You're coming back, you're taking each element of array, and it knows to step through each element, and then it passes it through to right host. And again, right host knows automatically that you're doing object, right? And there's an unseen operator in here as well, which is a pipeline operator. And this is going to look like a variable because essentially it is, with a $sign and an underscore. It knows that we are in this particular step of the pipeline objects with this operator, right? I screwed up. All right, don't let me confuse you. Disregard that for now. Regardless, what it's saying with all of this stuff is that you're passing through automatically each item in array to object and printing it out to the screen. Disregard the man behind the curtain because he doesn't know what he's doing. All right, so again, passing things through the pipeline. Instead of directly doing an array to the screen, I can also do array to a pipeline, and I'm going to take the implication of the items here with right host, and I'm going to do a foreground color of green. I like green. Green's a good color, right? And you see what it did is it took each item in turn and it made them all green when it wrote them out, because it took each item in array, passed it to the right host, turned it green. Now, there's other things I can do with pipelines. So, for example, I can say, let's see, what's a good example? If I do a get child item, and what this is doing is it's looking for all the child items of a particular object. If I don't specify an object in PowerShell here, it's taking the desktop that I have, which is the current location, as the default, and that's based on the path option. If I don't specify path, it just takes the current path. But I can also say path C:, there we go, with a backslash. Unfortunately, you got to be specific in certain cases. And it passes through all that fun stuff. But if I just do a get child item, without that, you see it takes the current location. And I can again pass this through to a pipe, and I can say right host foreground color green, and you see it wrote each of the item to the screen in green. And you're wondering maybe, okay, hey, why didn't it give me that other stuff, the last write time and whatnot? Well, when you have a complex object like a response that you get from child item, it's going to take a specific name or an ID for that object, and it's going to refer to that directly when you pass it through. You still have all that information. You still passed all that information through the pipeline, but it's not going to necessarily directly deal with it. So just to illustrate in this case here, I'm going to save, let's say contents equals to get child item. Contents, of course, is what we saw earlier, but if I do contents and I say get type, you see it comes back with this object, and it's a system type array. It's containing a lot of other stuff, and I can actually step through this. This dot operator is another autocomplete availability for you. You can step through. I've got things like count. You see I've got two objects in contents, which corresponds, of course, again to cleanup and test script, which is why I got back two objects here, right? I can also step through and I can say things like, is it read-only, is it synchronized, length, etc. But it will also give me you see I'm passing through it. When you get these little bracket things, you're getting a lot of other functions that you can do things with this. I guess this isn't a good example of what I was looking for. If you have an array, typically you can pass through. Oh, that's because it's an array. It's not a hash table. Okay. Anyways, you can pass through. Sometimes you see these. You get these length and name and last write time. You can pass that information through. In this particular case, it's an array, so I have to call the index first. If I do it, you see now I get some extra information: link type, mode, target, attributes, creation time, etc. And let's see, full name, right? So object 0 in this array for cleanup is passing me now the full name, right? I get these little various attributes. In this particular case, what it took was probably name. Yeah. All right. We passed through get child item to write host. It took the thing and it took the index name and it passed that through and did that. All right. Ah, great, right? Okay, so you can see that we can pass things through with the pipeline. If I want to do more complicated objects, more complicated operations in PowerShell, the pipeline is useful for that, because if I, for example, get an array, and I'm just going to overwrite this array that we had earlier before, and I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4. I now have an array of numbers. And I can confirm this by saying array element 0 get type, and it comes back with integer 32. So I know that item 0 in this array is an integer. The array itself is, surprise, surprise, an array. Right? It says object here, but you kind of go back and forth with these things, what they actually are. So I can take that now, array, and I can say, hopefully this works and I don't look stupid again, plus 2? No, can't do that. Expressions are only available, oh man. Alright, so even guys like me get confused from time to time. In this particular case, I can't use pipeline. So what I'm going to do something else instead is the ForEach. And this is another programming concept. It's a little more advanced. I was hoping to do this in the second video, but I guess we'll go ahead and get started here. ForEach allows me to step through elements in an array and do things with them. So in this particular case, I'm going to say for each. And now I'm going to declare another variable, but this is a temporary variable. I'm going to say I, or I can say number, it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to say in array, right? So for each number that you find in the variable array, and now I'm going to do a squiggly bracket. You said parentheses here. When you do a for or an if or anything like that, you're going to do the first set in the parentheses, and then the actual code that you want to do for each number in an array is in a squiggly bracket, and that's the keys that are next to the backslash. It's going to be shift square bracket essentially. This is where I write the code. I'm going to say number plus 2, and I'm going to close it. All right, and what this is going to do is going to step through every item that's in an array, temporarily assign it to the variable number, and then in the code it's going to take number and add 2 to it. And I'm not doing anything with the response here, but PowerShell knows by default, hey, let's write this to the screen. All right, so if I come back, you see here I get 3, 4, 5, 6, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 2. All right, so I can step through each element in an array. I could do the similar thing with pipelines in other cases, just not this particular one, okay? But you definitely want to, in circumstances, being able to step through an array to see things like that. I can also accomplish this in other ways with things such as a do while loop. And what do while is, you will see, I will do a do, I will open code here, and I will say, let me start real quick here. I'm going to just do an I equals 0. And then we will do a do sorry guys, having a brain fart here. Array, and then we're going to provide an index, which is this I number here, plus 2. And then I'm going to hit enter here, and you see it gives me this little double arrow here, and that's because I didn't finish something on the previous line, so it's expecting further information from me. So what I'm going to do in this case here is put in a second line of code in this do. What would you call this? A function or something like that? This bit of code that I'm going to do, literally do. And the second line that I want to do is I want to do I, and I'm going to add one to this. And a shortcut, by the way, I can do an I equals I plus 1. There's a shorter way to do this. You can do I plus equals 1, right? That's going to automatically add 1 to I every time. Switch my window here so you guys can see a little bit better. Hopefully you've been able to see this whole time. I can also do a I plus plus. It automatically will add another 2I. And then now I'm going to close my bracket here. So that closes out the code for the do, and then I'm going to say while I is, and I'm going to do a logical operator here. I'll explain that in just a second here. I'm going to do a less than 4. And I'm going to close that out, and we're going to execute. All right, so that was successful. We set the variable I to 0. We're attempting to do the following code between the squiggle brackets, right? We're going to take the array, and we're going to reference an element within that array. In this case, the very first time that we run this, excuse me, I is equal to 0. And we're going to take the that response, and we're going to add 2 to it. All right, so the very first one, of course, 1 plus 2 equals to 0, because the 0th element of array is 1. All right, and then because I hit enter without closing out the do, it asked me for another line, so it does a second line of code in this do. And what I did is, of course, I plus plus, which is going to add the number a 1 to I, and then it's, of course, going to loop, right? So we have to constrain that loop with the while. What this means is keep doing this until you reach this condition inside these parentheses. And so the condition here is the I variable must be less than 4, right? So as soon as you hit 4, stop. Don't go back and do again, right? It terminates. So the first time around it was 0, it pulled a 1, it added 2, it looped again for 4, 5, and 6, and then I, in this last case, reached 4. And it did not go back and start again to try and grab the 5th element, which is to say I equals to 4 from the array, right? It stopped. All right. Now, so comparison operator, or logical operators here, also known as comparison operators, you have a couple of these. These are fairly straightforward, what you would imagine. Less than just simply means if this is less than this, this will evaluate to true, right? Anytime you have these parentheses, the ultimate result, of course, is always going to be a true or a false, because you're trying to do some sort of yes or no question, right? While, if this is true, keep doing this. If not true, stop doing this, right? There's also a greater than. There's a less than or equal to, so it would have kept going if I had done this. It would have tried to do one more, and it would have errored out because it would have not had it, right? Or it probably would have thrown a 2, actually. It would have just had 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, because it didn't have the first half. It just took the 2 and threw it out, probably. Just for comparison's sake, let's say less than or equal to 4. Right? So it did it this time. And the reason you see it didn't give me 3, 4, 5, 6 again, because I was already still equal to 0. If I wanted to do that again, I would need to pull back the I equals 0 and then write this code again. There you go. You see 3, 4, 5, 6, 2. It didn't have anything for here. It just took 2 and threw that out to the screen. All right. So you have less than or equal to, greater than equal to. There's also, of course, equal, and a couple other ones which are more advanced. If you're working with strings, you can do things like contains, right? Arrays, you can do contains. Strings, you can do things like, because equal to still works. It's a hyperloaded operator, which is to say it works with both strings and numbers. You can also do things like not equals to, and you can do things like like. A like operator is going to look in a string to see if stuff exists within that string based on that. So just to show an example here, I'm going to do an if statement. An if then else statement is a standard programming concept. All right, let's go back here and let's declare a variable first. Hello equals to hello, right? If hello contains hell, right? Yes. Okay. If you want to be strict here, you'd put the quotation marks, but it doesn't really matter in this particular case because right. Oh, I'm doing a shortcut here. This is right host. That does work, by the way. I'll explain that in a second here. If hello contains hell, right host yes. Well, you see, it failed. You're like, well, hello contained hell, right? Well, no, because again, contains is a array operator, not a string operator. If I want to check to see whether the phrase hell exists inside of hello, I don't do a contains. I would do a like, and then I would put some asterisks here, which indicate that they're wildcard. They're wildcards, essentially saying if anything exists before hell, that's fine. But since I'm not putting a wildcard operator at the end here, nothing can exist after hell. So in this case, you see it still comes out to false. If I put the asterisk at the end, it says yes, right? Because hello matches hell wildcard, all right? And I can also, of course, do the opposite, which is not like, and then I would just flip this just for the sake of argument. Oh, right, logic. That, of course, doesn't evaluate. So there you go. If it does not look like this, right, no, right? So it doesn't look like wildcard hell. It looks like hell wildcard, of course. It comes back no, right? And you can do, there's more information about this available online, and there's also a way within PowerShell. It is about, oh shoot, about comparison operators. Oop. All right, that's not a real thing. Never mind. Anyways, there's a way that you can see all that information online. You can always, of course, just do a real quick search for the logical operators in PowerShell. Let's see, get help. If is going to give me all of the things related to help. And then some. All right. Well, not to waste time on that. Anyways, guys, I think that's a good ending point for the first video. You got the start here on some PowerShell concepts. You've got the start here on some programming concepts. We've gone over PowerShell, how to use it, how to start writing some code and how to execute some code. We've gone over the concepts of a variable, which is just a place where you store some information. You can do that in a lot of complicated ways. You can do simple things like integers, or you can do strings. You can do even arrays, which is a group of things, right? You can go further in that with PowerShell. You can make objects, which are groups of things, right? It can get really complicated. You can make custom objects in PowerShell, which is great. When you return things like the getChildItem, what you're getting back is a custom object that PowerShell uses, right? Okay. Then you can also do various operations, right? Typical mathematical operations. You can also do the hyperloaded operations, such as taking a string, putting it together with another string, right, to get an extra long string which contains both strings. And you can also do the comparison operators. You can do the greater than, less than, contains, like, things like that, right? And when you're working with logic in PowerShell, ultimately everything is going to focus around checking things, setting things, doing things. You're going to have to figure out logic around those. So we have the ForEach statement, which will step through items in an array or an object. We have the do while loop, which is going to let us do stuff until we reach a very specific condition. I do want to caution you on that one because you can get into infinite loops. If you don't set up your while command very, very carefully, you will end up in a situation where your code will run forever. And I do mean that forever. You can stop code in PowerShell anytime, of course, by hitting Control-C on your keyboard, or you can just simply close the window. But if you do write code that, let's say, for example, write something to your hard drive and you end up in an infinite loop, that's not a good situation. You will use all of the storage in your hard drive, crash your computer, so on and so on. Hopefully you can Control-C before you destroy your computer, but just do be careful with the do while loops. They're one of the more dangerous loops that you can use in programming. And finally, we will do an if-else statement. Oh, I didn't finish describing that one. Let's do that real quick here. All right, so we have if 1 is less than 2, right? Yes, right? This is an if then else statement in the short form. So we do an if, right? If this evaluates into a true statement, 1 less than 2, right? That comes out to true. Do this code, right? And in this case, write again is a shortcut for write host. So there's a lot of other shortcuts in PowerShell that you'll learn over time, which are great, such as, for example, with getChildItem, you can do a GCI, right? It does exactly the same thing as getChildItem. With that if then else statement, I can also, of course, do an else command, which is to say, if this evaluates to false, you're not doing this, you're going to do this, which is write no. Of course, we got a yes in this case, but if we were to say greater than, you'd come out and you get your no, right? You can also do more complicated things such as else, if else, wait, hold on, else if, there we go. We do another evaluation. 1 is equal to 1, right? Universe is normal, right? So we do another evaluation. If this comes out to true, then we do this else statement. And of course, you can pair again on the else statement here, right? Panic. Right, we're not panicking yet because 1 does not equal 1, but let's say this ever happened to for whatever reason 1 did not equal 1, we would get panic on the screen, which would be appropriate because if 1 did not equal 1, that would be a bad situation. All right, so there we go. 3 major things that you can do for logical evaluations: the do while statement, the for each statement, and the if else statement. We'll go into more advanced things in the next video. But for now, guys, good luck, and I will see you in the next video.